everybody. I'm Dale Joe for those who don't know me here, but I am one of 35 members of our office's Live Well Peer Support team. We have several members in here that I see, so thank you for coming. I have the pleasure to introduce Heather Williams. Heather was very instrumental in helping our office get our peer support program kicked off in May of 2023. She endured 2 days in this very room teaching all of us about peer support, and we're very blessed to have her here because she's just an amazing person that really has benefited our office. So with that here, I just want to introduce Heather Williams.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I am honored to be here. I flew up this morning and I'm flying back after this. And when they asked me to come back and present on this topic for all of you, there was no hesitation because I know how committed this department is to your wellness. And today isn't just about addiction. Today is about your overall well-being. And I'm hoping to plant some seeds, give you some tools along the way. But before I do, let me help you understand where I came from. I've spent the last 29 years working in and around public safety. I started my career in my 20s working for Orange County Probation as a deputy probation counselor. From there, I got a master's degree in criminal justice with the goal of becoming a probation officer. So I take the test, I get on the list, and as I'm waiting to promote, I had just had my son Andrew, and within 6 months of having my son, I'm now going through a very difficult divorce. I'm working shift work, and I'm trying to figure out how am I going to stay put, wait to get promoted, while also take care of a newborn child and my own sanity. And so you might be thinking, why is she sharing that with us off the front of this presentation? And the reason I share that is to help us all understand that as part of our life journeys, sometimes we go through adversities, challenges, traumas, and we think, well, that's not what I signed up for. But it's truly what we decide to do with it. And so in those moments, I decided it was time to go look for a regular business hour job. I ended up finding a job working in victim services or victim witnesses. All of you know it, in Orange County, which is where I'm from. I oversaw all of our special victim programs, gangs, homicide, sexual assault, domestic violence. And then on June 29th, 2003, yes, I remember the date, and I remember it was a Sunday at 9 a.m. A man suffering from schizophrenia worked as a box boy at an Albertsons in the city of Irvine, California. He walked in with a samurai sword, wearing a trench coat and a beret. He went in and he killed 2, and he was shot and neutralized by an officer. Little did I know by definition that that would be the beginning of my crisis response journey and an active shooter response in that. And so as a result of spending a week and a half rendering assistance to victims, witnesses in the community, I ended up creating a crisis response team. We had 17 of us on the team, and we would be on call 24/7 at the request of law enforcement to mitigate the trauma experienced by victims, witnesses, and the community. Well, in 2003, when you think about that rock in the pond metaphor and all the ripples and all the people who were impacted by major incidents, none of you were included in that ripple. I was not included in that ripple. We were barely paying attention to victims and witnesses at that time. So as a result of being out on calls involving death, homicides, murder, suicides, child deaths, all the stuff that our law enforcement professionals go to, I remember being at the hospital after a 3-year-old had died in her sleep. And the sergeant walked over to me, tapped me on the shoulder, and said, "Heather, I know you're here for the family, but would you mind talking to the officer that just did CPR on the little girl? He's got a 2- and a 5-year-old at home." And so all I did was sit outside with him and say, "John, how does a 3-year-old die in her sleep?" And he shook his head and he said, "I can't wrap my head around this," because the whole time he was doing CPR, he was thinking about his 2- and his 5-year-old. And what if this were my family or my child and we were having to endure this? And at the same time while having this conversation with him, my daughter was also 3 at the time. And so we together projected onto our own families the tragedies and the things that we were seeing and witnessing during that moment. And that for me was the beginning of a pivot from focusing on victims, witnesses, and community to then doing first responder debriefing. And so that began to grow in Orange County law enforcement. And while debriefing deputies after a train versus pedestrian incident, one of the deputies said something to me that truly changed the trajectory of my life and my career. She said, Heather, we get training in everything, but no one has ever trained us how to deal with the stressors and traumas of this job. And I want you to reflect on that. When you started in this career, did you have training on the stressors and traumas of this job? Because I know I didn't. Going into probation, no training. Going into victim services, no training. Peer support, no. It was in that aha moment that I realized that we were all collectively suffering in silence, and that I was doing the exact same thing that everybody else does in this field. You suck it up, you say you're fine, and you move on to the next case, call, situation. And what I learned from that experience is that how are we all collectively going to be physically, mentally, spiritually, and relationship well if we don't do something to change this culture and make it okay to not be okay? And so my catchphrase has been for 15 years now that it is okay to not be okay. And it doesn't mean you're not okay for the rest of your life. It means you're not okay in the moment. You might not be okay for a couple weeks. Maybe it's going to take until that case is done and adjudicated that you know that you're then going to be okay. But it's through changing that culture and that stigma of talking about the human element in this job. And so as a result of these presentations, I was asked by the Anaheim Police Department to help them start their peer support program. And from there it grew. Orange County law enforcement was like, what about us? What about our department? We want that peer support thing. So I'm very honored to say that I've helped most of Orange County law enforcement start or reboot their programs. I was also hired full-time as the regional peer support coordinator at the Orange County Sheriff's Department. I was there for 5 years building a program, building a team, responding to critical incidents, doing the debriefing. And then I got a tap on the shoulder by now. He's now a retired chief. And he said, Heather, you need to go back to school. I was 40 years old, 2 kids, on call 365. And I said, nah, I'm all right. I got a master's degree, that's good enough. And he said, Heather, we in public safety need you to go back to school to get those initials after your name so that you can take the next step and help more public safety professionals. And so I did go back to school. I got a doctorate in psychology. For the last 5 years, I am a first responder psychologist. And when I say first responder, I don't just mean police and fire. We've got DAs, we've got people who work in the system, because it takes special people to do the work that you do, to protect and serve your communities and to fight for victims' rights and to do all the work that you represent in here. And so I see my team, Premier First Responder Psychological Services, to be the team that fights to serve and protect all of you. And so it's been a long journey, and I truly believe every single one of us are on our own journey and on our own path. And so this presentation, I will tell you, is not just about addiction. In fact, I'm going to tell you right now that I am not the alcohol police. We're all adults in here, and we're going to do what we do. But what I'm hoping to impart on you today is some insight to where addiction comes from to be preventative or maybe intervene at this point, but also talk about stress management and how our body and brains are connected through our nervous system and the impact that stress and trauma can have on us, and then some resources on what to do with it. So with that being said, I love when PowerPoints decide just to freeze up out of nowhere. Just give me a second. It's okay. Most computers will do this. All right, here we go. Unstuck. So, what is the actual problem? According to the American Bar Association Commission on Lawyer Assistance Programs and the Hazleton Betty Ford Foundation. It showed that nearly 21% of lawyers and others in legal professions were considered problem drinkers. Now, I'm not a big fan of stats. And the reason I'm not is because people don't tell the whole truth. And some people don't respond. And that was something I learned in my stats class, and I learned throughout just listening to people. So do I believe that that number might be higher? I do. Lawyers suffer from depression, alcohol abuse, and substance abuse at a rate that is 2 to 3 times the rate of the general population. So this is according to the ABA Commission. Now, we know it can be a problem, and we know that people use substances and other behaviors to cope. That's just the reality of the culture and the work that everybody in here does. What I'm here to tell you is that addiction isn't just about alcohol. I'm not just here to talk to you about substance. I'm here to talk to you about pain. And what you're going to learn when I show you this next video is that pain is what oftentimes drives addictive behaviors. So when you think about addiction, I want you to think about any and all of these things. People are addicted to video games. People are addicted to pornography and sex. People are addicted to alcohol, drugs, our cell phones, social media. How many of you would admit that when your cell phone buzzes, rings, or makes some kind of noise to alert you that you have a text or an email that you pick it up? Okay. So what that's called is conditioning. In the world of psychology, it's called being conditioned. We are all, how many of you took like a basic psych class at one point in school? Remember Pavlov's dog? That every time they rang the bell, they would salivate, right? With the meat powder kind of thing. So every time our phone buzzes, vibrates, or makes a noise, and we pick it up, we are now conditioned to look at that. And we are, as a society, not just in this room, but as a society, addicted to the phone. And when we scroll through social media and we see a life, we get a dopamine hit. So this is a very chemical thing that's happening inside of our brain and inside of our body. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're doing it because you have a problem. I'm just telling you that based on new research, we are addicted to our technology. And so are our kids. How many of you have kids that have phones? Adolescents, kids, right? We see it with them too. So this is a very real thing. But what I want you to understand is addiction through a different lens. Not necessarily just a disease model, because it is a medical condition and it is protected. You know, if someone goes to rehab, it's protected under family medical leave and all that good stuff. But I want you to learn about it from a different lens. So I'm going to show you this video.
Like I mentioned, you weren't in the room when I first said it, this is the first time I've ever brought someone like you and talk about this subject at a business conference like this. And the reason I did it is because some people may not see the relevancy, but I want us to be able to describe to them what it is. And there's much that I can ask you about. I do want to
Well, let's show them the relevancy.
Okay, what is addiction? Let's define
right.
it.
So addiction is complex, but it's manifested in any behavior that a person finds temporary pleasure or relief in, and therefore craves, but suffers negative consequences in the long term and can't give up. Now notice any behavior, I didn't say drugs. Most of the time we think about addiction, we think of substances, and that certainly is one important target of addictive behavior, but I said any behavior. That could be gambling, could be sex, could be relationships, could be internet, could be Facebook, could be shopping, as in my case, could be eating, could be work. Any behavior that gives you temporary relief, pleasure, but you suffer negative consequences, you don't get a definition. Now let me ask you this question. I'll go into that definition. How many people here will acknowledge that sometime or another in your lives you've had some kind of an addiction? Sometime. Okay, that's how relevant it is. Okay, and if I'm going with that stream, let me also ask you guys another question, for which I'll ask some of you to just put your hand up and shout out your answers. I'm going to ask you not what you were addicted to or when or for how long. I'm just going to ask you, what did you like about it? What did it do for you? What did it give you in the short term? So who would tell me? Relief from? Relief from pain. Thank you. Anybody else? Sorry?
Control.
Control gave you relief from pain, gave you control. What else? Love.
Escape.
Somebody said. Escape from anxiety. Thank you. What else?
Was that loneliness?
It dealt with loneliness. Okay, let's look at these things now. Escape from pain. Pain relief. Sense of control. Relief from loneliness. What else did people say?
Anxiety.
Relief from anxiety. In other words, inner peace. So right away when you understand that, you get that the addiction wasn't your problem. Your addiction was your attempt to solve a problem. And the real question is, how did that problem develop? How come it's 7 billion human beings in the world that you felt lonely? How come you lacked a sense of agency, control, authority in your life? Why were you in so much emotional pain? And everything you said, the loneliness, the lack of power, the lack of control, the anxiety, these are forms of emotional pain. So my mantra on addiction is not why the addiction, but why the pain. And this is where we can talk more about it, but as you and I both know, the current model of addiction is either the legal one, which says it's a choice that people make and therefore we have to punish them for it, or it's a medical one, in which case it's an inherited brain disease. But it isn't either of those things. What it actually is an attempt to solve a human life problem, that of emotional pain, loneliness, distress, anxiety, whatever it is. And the real question then is, what happened in my life, or your life, Joe, or everybody else's lives here, that we incurred pain? And then how do we deal with our pain? Because the addiction itself magnifies the pain, it multiplies it, it increases it exponentially. So it begins in pain, as Eckhart Tolle, the spiritual teacher, says, addictions begin in pain and they end in pain.
Yeah. Well, it was on this stage last year that I actually, for the first time, publicly told about not only my drug addiction, which I, for several years ago was the first time I started talking about being a drug addict.
And what was that? Is cocaine was it?
It was cocaine, yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, heck, when I was between the ages of 16 and 18, it started with, I would get high every day and smoke pot. I would take pills, speed. I would snort crystal meth. I would snort cocaine. And there was one day I remember where one day I was freebasing. I was on LSD, I was smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, taking mushrooms, and snorting crystal meth, all in one day. And
Okay.
I mean, I was in bad shape. And now, Gabor, when I was in Vancouver, you toured me around where you actually, Vancouver's East Side, because you treated some of the worst addicts on Vancouver's East Side for many years. And during that time, I did a lot of drugs, and then I moved away from the environment, started exercising, ended up getting a job in a mental hospital as a mental health tech, and I would take the patients that were there for addiction to AA. I would drive them to AA meetings and NA meetings, and I would sit in on those meetings, never realizing later in life how much relevance it had. But the core addiction was a sexual addiction, because I was molested as a kid. My mother died when I was 4. I was molested as a kid. I was paid money not to say anything between the ages of 8 to 10. And it wired in my head that sex is not an intimate act of love and oneness. It's something you do get off.
If I may interrupt, there was something else here too. So I'll talk about myself and I'll talk about you.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my addictions has been to work. In fact, that's a continued challenge for me, if you look at my travel schedule. So I got a certain message from the world. I was born in Budapest, Hungary in 1944. Jewish parents, 2 months before the Nazis occupied Hungary. So I spent the first year of my life with my mother under Nazi rule, and she was in terror the whole year, as you can imagine. Parents killed in Auschwitz and so on. My father was away in forced labor. The message I got from the world is that the world didn't want me. Not because Hitler didn't want me, because I didn't know Hitler, but my mother wasn't happy. And children are narcissists in the developmental sense. They take everything personally. So when the bad things are happening, it must be about me. And if she's not happy around me, Thich Nhat Hanh, the spiritual teacher, says that the greatest gift parents can give their children is their own happiness. Because the children take that personally. It's about us. We must be great creatures. So when my mother is unhappy and depressed and in terror, I get the message the world doesn't want me. And then at 1 year of age, she gives me to a stranger to save my life. So I don't see her for a month. I get the message the world doesn't want me. Now, then in Canada, 30 odd years later, I become a physician. Well, one way to deal with not being wanted is to become a doctor. Because not they're going to want you all the time. They're going to want you when they're being born, they want you when they're dying, and they're going to want you at every moment in between. And the beeper is always going. This is before cell phones, of course. The beeper is always going, and you're getting validation every moment. And what it is a compensation for the sense of not being wanted that I've never dealt with. Now, in your case, you got a message as well, that you're wanted through your body. You're wanted through your body. You're wanted when you're sexually available. That's the message you get. What are you going to do? So, especially if you look at men who are sex addicts and women who are sex addicts, there's no such thing as what's the word, an infomaniac. That's just a slander. What it really is women, or sometimes men, who've learned that only through their bodies and only through the sexual act are they actually wanted. Well, that's really addictive, because we all need to be wanted. And I think that's also what's behind it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So,
insightful. Dr. Gabor Mate is all over podcasts, he's all over YouTube, and he speaks to trauma, addiction, ADHD, all sorts of mental health issues, and he is really, in my humble opinion, very brilliant. I see him as my mentor, and I've learned a lot from listening to his work. So the message here is that it can be any behavior that gives us temporary relief from the things that were discussed, whether it be pain or anxiety or to feel loved or loneliness or whatever it may be. And I will tell you that it's not uncommon for people in this type of work to also be addicted to work, because it's where you have some control. It's where you have purpose and value. And so I want you to start looking at addiction from a place of pain, but also it provides pleasure. It gives you something that might be missing.
what?
And so when it comes to mental health issues, you know, people say, oh, can you talk about mental health and addiction? Well, it's all one and the same. And so burnout, compassion fatigue, insomnia, anxiety, depression, or post-traumatic stress injury, those are the types of mental health issues that come from not focusing on what's bothering you, by not talking about the things that you have been through or that you're going through, or how cases impact you, or your work, or your home life, or your childhood, develop into mental health issues as a result of not dealing with the things that have happened. And when we can't control the symptoms, that is oftentimes where we go to those behaviors that make us feel good. So again, somebody struggles to not have control at work, I'm going to go home and play video games. No problem. I'm struggling in my personal life, so I'm going to work more. No problem. It becomes a problem in our world when it impairs some level of functioning. And so when we engage in a behavior that starts to impact work, it starts to impact home, it starts to impact our relationships with our children, then the impairment means there's a problem. So again, just these behaviors alone, no problem. It's when they start to impair our lives in some way. And I wanted to show you this picture because post-traumatic stress injury can occur as a result of cumulative trauma being exposed over and over again to the cases and the victimizations and the violence and all the things that go on in your county and what you prosecute. And so we now have evidence that post-traumatic stress does injure the brain. I don't even refer to it as a disorder anymore. Because of the stigma attached to that word, we now have proof it's an injury, and I will tell you that now that we can see it, we can also see when we heal it through therapy and through talking and through different things that I'll share with you. So how addiction shows up. How do we know if someone has an addiction problem? They will lie, they will omit truths, they will lie or minimize. I have clients who have addiction issues and it's, oh, I only had a couple, or I only watched for an hour, or only did this. And so the minimizing is an indicator of that. When it comes to substance use, right, like alcohol, we may see a weight gain. Short-term memory loss can also become an issue as a result of alcohol for too long. I will also tell you that too much stress can also increase our cortisol levels, which also affects our memory and our ability to focus. So when people come to me not with an addiction issue, but I can't focus, I can't remember anything, a lot of times it's the stress of the job. Mood swings, personality changes, withdrawal symptoms, some very evident ones, right, like shaking, moodiness, headaches, nausea, all of that. Increased tolerance, spending money on a habit, and it becomes, again, problematic. Shopping. We all get Amazon, right? Nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying anyone has a problem. It becomes a problem when you're in debt as a result of your spending, right? Whether it's alcohol or shopping or anything else that people buy. And it creates family conflict. So again, it has to do with the impairment aspect of the addictive behavior. These are some warning signs of alcoholism. Experiencing temporary blackouts. I had a firefighter I was working with, and when it came to drinking, he would either drink 13 and black out and not remember how he ended up on someone's front porch, or he would not drink at all. There was no moderating. And so there is something in the field of substance use called moderation management, where people learn how to moderate. Instead of 10, how about 3? Let's see where you're at. Understanding your buzz factor. Not being out of control, not impairing your ability to make good decisions when you have been drinking, things like that. Weight gain, we talked about. The mood swings, we talked about. The withdrawal symptoms, we also talked about. And so the other piece of it is the lying, but also the hiding of the addictive behavior or the alcohol is also a sign of alcoholism. So when it comes to the use of something that will impair you, you may notice a decrease in work performance. Do we have supervisors in the room? And we have peer support in the room? So I see this as an opportunity for you to be looking out for your peers, for each other, your partners, and everyone that you work with. Difficulty concentrating, poor decision making, erratic behavior. So there's a video I show in the basic peer support class of an attorney who is basically being disbarred for just completely inappropriate, disrespectful behavior. And so if you start to see someone having erratic emotional moments, not able to regulate themselves in court, or having conflict around the office more, something isn't right. It doesn't mean that it is addiction related. It could mean that they've had a death in the family, or they're dealing with a kid that's pissing them off. It could be anything. But we need to look out for each other. You don't have to be on peer support to support your peers. Missed deadlines, issues with the team that you work with, or a victim witness communication, your lack of communication, a lack of care and concern, and potential ethical violations. So these are some things that people have seen over the years, and I think it's important that we're looking out for each other. And so then, people have said, well, if you have an addiction, then why don't you just stop? And we've all heard the term, you have to hit rock bottom, but there's so much more to it. It comes down to someone's willingness to want to change. And there is a model, it's called the trans-theoretical change model, and it shows you that there are different phases of someone's willingness and readiness to change, and it starts with pre-contemplation. If you have someone who's unaware and in denial that they have a problem, are they going to change? Absolutely not. I don't have the problem, you have the problem. The next phase would be contemplation. They're aware that there's a problem. They have maybe hit that rock bottom, and their family's like, I'm going to divorce you if you don't stop drinking. And so they are now getting ready to want to make that change. But it's preparation. It's let me call what programs are out there, let me see what AA meetings are available to me. Do I want to go to Zoom? Do I want to go to a closed group at a church? Like they're looking at what are my options. And then the acting part is literally getting into a program, getting into therapy, going to those meetings, reading books, and being resourceful. So it goes back to any type of behavior change. If we're in a state of denial or we know and we're like, no, I'm not ready yet, I'm going to continue to eat sugar. Did you know sugar is an addiction? It affects us in very similar ways. Then you're not ready. And that's okay. But the longer that we wait to get the help we need, the potential more disturbance to work and distractions and impairment at home as well. So when it comes to all of you in this room, I want you to notice the people that you work with. And something that I teach peer supporters is when you notice that someone is behaving differently, acting differently, shows up, physically looks different, there's absolutely nothing wrong with going to someone that you work with, that you work day in and day out and say, hey, I've noticed you're not yourself lately. Are you okay? Or I've noticed that you look really tired. How are you sleeping? So when you notice, 9 out of 10 times, someone's not going to respond back to you with like, what do you mean you've noticed? Although somebody will try to say that. It's more like, wow, someone cares about me and they're checking in. And they may lie, they may say everything's great and everything's fine, right? Because they want to protect and be private, and that's okay. But the fact is that if you're concerned about one of your peers, one of your partners, please notice and say something, because you never know how much you may be saving a life in that moment. And when it comes to confidentiality, know what your rights are, right? You're a lot of attorneys in this room, know what your rights are when it comes to peer support confidentiality. You have a policy, and I know that if someone comes to you guys and says, hey, I have a problem and I need help, they're gonna help you get to the help. So we need to make sure that that is there for you, as well as the resources available to you in your area. I was talking to Dale before we got started about resources for the Sacramento area, and I gave him the name of a rehab facility, it's called a CUA, that I learned about in Orange County that I believe is still up here. And so having those resources available to you, even if you don't want to talk to anybody, is really important. Treating addiction starts with, again, the person being ready to have that conversation, and some can do it through individual therapy. They might go weekly at first. For some people who are in really bad shape and need maybe medical detox, it may start with outpatient or inpatient treatment where you actually live on the grounds of where the programming is. And I will tell you that addiction is a family affair. And I would not be surprised, based on my experience, if some of you in here grew up in an alcoholic home. Because I have a lot of first responders who grew up in an alcoholic home. And I see the impact it had on their children because now they're the adults. And so when someone is getting treatment, the family is also involved in getting treatment with the person who is in therapy or in the treatment facility. And I always say it takes a village to do this work. So you have peer support. Do you have chaplains? Okay. And maybe if someone wanted a chaplain, you could contact, right, the Sacramento Sheriff's Department or one of the local PDs to help with that. I could also help even from down south. So now I want to segue a little bit into how stress and trauma show up. And we know about, oh, my stomach hurts, or I have a headache and it's stress related or it's tension related. But did you know that stress can show up through being irritable and impatient and having body aches and pains that you can't explain, and all the medical conditions? In fact, according to the American Medical Association, 85% of disease is connected to the emotional state. 85% of disease. Heart attacks, strokes, cancer, irritable bowel syndrome, chronic fatigue, type 2 diabetes. Ladies, we are more likely to get type 2 diabetes due to stress than men are. So understanding this mind-body connection is very, very important. When we look at wellness, we're not just talking about the psychology in the brain, we're talking about how one influences the other. And so all of these things start to tell us that something isn't right in our body. And so how I look at this is from a nervous system perspective. Our sympathetic nervous system is our fight, flight, or freeze response. When we are in a high stress situation, cortisol and adrenaline flood our system, and it causes us to react in all the different ways that I talked about. And the idea is to get into a calmer state, which it would be a parasympathetic state, where our body is calmer, our nervous system is calmed down. We're not in this scary fight or flight situation. So how do we do that? Well, first I want to show you what a dysregulated nervous system looks like. It feels like you're tired all the time, and you may even go to bed tired but wired. So you're physically tired, mentally tired, but your brain's still on a loop thinking about your to-do list, and where do the kids have to go, and I can't believe he said that to me in court, or whatever is going on in your life. You feel on edge and overwhelmed. So even when things are good, it feels like, when is the next shoe going to drop? That is that feeling that comes from that. You may overact and feel a bit unregulated, meaning that you're reacting in a way that's not consistent with the situation, right? You go home and the dog spills water on the floor and you scream at the dog, and you're like, okay, it's just water. That's your logical brain. But what's happening due to the stress and the pressure is our frontal lobe goes offline, and that's where we make decisions, and that's where we regulate our emotion. So again, it's this brain-body connection thing that causes us to have these types of reactions. You have concentration problems, you are spaced out or numb. I have a lot of people who say, I just feel numb. And that numbness is almost like a protective factor so that they can get through the day or get through the night or get through life. And that's not living, that's existing. So I want to make sure we understand that this dysregulated state, a lot of people go into because of the amount of stress and pressure and the types of cases that you're working on. So then how do we regulate our nervous system and cope well? So I'm going to encourage you maybe to write some things down, get your phone out, put them in your phone, because you don't know what's going to work until you try it. And I call myself the wellness guinea pig. So I'll try everything and I'll say, yes, this works for me, no, this doesn't, just so I can share it with all of you. And I'm going to introduce you to different types of magnesium. Our bodies typically don't get enough magnesium through natural food. And so people will take supplements. These are specific to sleeping. And this magnesium spray, both of these are on Amazon, but this spray was introduced to me by a police officer I taught. And he told me about it. I'm like, oh, one less pill to take? Okay. So I spray the inner parts of my arm, rub them together and let it dry. And within 30 to 40 minutes, I am tired. So sleep, insomnia issues, anxiety issues, for any of you this is resonating with, again, try it. It can't hurt you. It's all natural. Another way to help your nervous system calm down is stretching. This type of static stretching actually puts your brain and body into a parasympathetic state. So again, these aren't, this isn't rocket science. This isn't making you do anything that's crazy. It is just things that we have learned, the science of understanding how to calm our brains and bodies down. And you can put in Google pictures of static stretches or a YouTube video on it, and you can follow along, and that will also help you relax at the end of the night. Breathing. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of different types of meditative breathing. I do the 4-4-4, where I inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, and slowly out of my mouth, let go for 4 seconds. That is taking your nervous system that's spinning and calming you down as well. Another aspect to help your nervous system calm down is meditation. And now I know a lot of people who are in this heightened state have a hard time slowing their brains down, and you will. This is something you have to practice, and it will feel like ping pongs in your head. You'll be thinking about all these different things, and all you do is you practice. You practice for 3 minutes. You do a 6-minute meditation. You do a 10-minute, and you just bring yourself back. And this is something I do most nights when I lay down to go to sleep. So magnesium, meditations, and For some people, yoga. Right? This is actually a yoga pose, and it's stretching. So if you don't want to call it yoga, call it stretching. But the bottom line is that all of these things scientifically help our nervous system and our brain calm down to help our overall well-being. So instead of reaching for that beer or that glass of wine or that glass of whiskey or any other behavior that we engage in, these are some other things that we can do to calm it all down. Grounding. Grounding is laying on the ground. It's laying on your floor while you watch TV. It's putting your bare feet in the grass or sand. It is swimming. It is cold plunging. Does anyone do cold plunges in here? They're absolutely terrible and wonderful. Am I right? They're so painful, but what it's doing is it's helping to regulate your nervous system. So again, all this grounding stuff is really important for us to calm ourselves down. And as you can see, all these health benefits of grounding, from improved mood to sleep to reducing pain, increasing our immunity. So again, all this stuff is free to you. And all you have to do is be willing to try one thing after another to see what works, to help calm everything down at the end of that day. Walking is another resource for you. When we walk, especially outside, our feet do this, correct? They go back and forth. So when we walk, we're creating a bilateral stimulation that helps our brain reprocess information. So if you've ever been upset, right, you get in a fight with your spouse or your kids upset you, and you go for a walk outside, do you feel better? Anyone willing to admit? Just even a head nod? Yes. Okay, thank you. So the reason that you feel better is because your thoughts are being reprocessed while you're walking. That's the science behind the bilateral stimulation. And there is a type of therapy called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, and it is through bilateral stimulation that you're reprocessing traumatic events and situations to feel better. So walking is really a brilliant way of healing as well. There is also something I'd like to introduce to you called the transition plan. And so I'm going to ask you, when you get off work, what do? You just close up your computer, get in your car, and jam home the best way you can. I want you to start being a little bit more intentional. Do you need to change out of your work clothes and put on, I don't know, workout clothes or sweats or something comfortable before you get in the car? Or do you do that right when you get home? On your drive home, can you ask yourself, as you sit in the car, where am I at physically? Where am I at mentally? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Did I go to the bathroom before I got in the car if I have a long drive? Am I irritated? Am I sad? By checking in on yourself, you're going to have a better way of being able to communicate with your family and your loved ones. You can use your drive time to relax, listen to podcasts, listen to comedy radio, engage in something outside of work, listen to a book, whatever is going to help you relax. And if you're going to talk to family and friends, please don't talk to ones that piss you off. We're trying to calm you down, not amp you back up. So just be mindful of that and just breathe. So this is another way to communicate with loved ones at home, is by recognizing what percentage of you is left at the end of your day. If you start your day at 100% energy, mental, whatever, at the end of the day, where are you at? Are you at 20% left, 10%, negative 20? What does that look like for you? And then that's how you're going to communicate to your family members so that they can support you in what you need as well as you supporting them in what they need. And this is just some suggested language. Hi, honey, I have about 10% left for my day. You're important to me and I want to be here for you. But I need 10, 15 minutes to change my clothes, eat some dinner, work out, shower, whatever it is. Then I'll have the ability to give you my undivided attention. So it's learning to communicate your needs so that you're doing a better job of communicating, so there aren't expectations that aren't realistic at home, while also taking care of you. I call it work-life imbalance, because I know in high-stress jobs with a lot of type A's working in this type of work, right, your car chargers, that the balance can feel imbalanced. And so this 50-50 thing isn't maybe realistic. So on your days off, can you set priorities? Can you focus one priority on your family, one priority on the home, one priority in your relationship, and one on you? Because when people say, I'm too busy to go to the gym, I'm too busy to go see my friends, I'm too busy to get my nails done, or go golf, or whatever people do, when we have a life with living it with intention, we do a little bit better job of prioritizing what's important. So by separating it out, it could be more helpful to you.
I like a pro-death crowd. Appreciate that. So I take this attitude into my jury selection, and it's a murder trial. I don't want to be there. I didn't know this, but when you get there, you can fill out a form saying you don't want to be there. And the last question on the form is pretty straightforward. It says, "Do you think you'd make a fair juror?" I was honest. I said, "No. I'm a comic. I get paid to make quick judgments and stick to them. And that's exactly what I plan on doing in your court." I thought that would get me tossed. It did not. It made me stay there. They put me in the jury selection box. The defense attorney starts asking questions in front of the defendant, just awkward. He's listening to us. And it was weird. The judge told us that the defendant had just been released from prison, where he had served several years for the attempted murder of a rival gang member. Now he's being charged with murdering a rival gang member. So I'm like, great. I'm going to room somebody, definitely getting better at murder. I thought that because when I saw him, I immediately thought, yeah, that guy's a murderer. And I thought that because he had gang tattoos all over his face, like a lot of gang tattoos over a lot of his face. And look, I know that having gang tattoos all over your face doesn't make you a murderer, unless you're charged with murder.
I'm glad to hear you laugh, because it is really, really an amazing aspect of healing and calming down. Laughing is just as effective as crying. It literally makes us feel better. It reduces cortisol and adrenaline. It increases our feel-good chemicals and the endorphins and the dopamine and all that good stuff. So find what works for you. Because of all the driving I do listen to a lot of Pandora comedy radio, and literally in a 2-hour drive, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm home. And I've laughed the entire time. So it's just finding what works for you. And remember too that the gallows humor that you have in the office, I'm assuming you laugh at shit you probably shouldn't laugh at. Or let me rephrase that. You laugh at things that are appropriate to laugh at here, but other people who don't get it might be offended. Is that more accurate? Yep. Okay. Keep doing that, because that is going to help you connect and share by sharing emotions and the way that you feel comfortable doing that. Gratitude is also a way to de-stress and to get us out of this negative mindset. We actually have a negativity bias built into our brain because the negative memories are what help us survive. And with the things that you hear and the things that you see and you have to deal with in your jobs, that's what keeps us safe. But we also can go down the rabbit hole of negativity, and then nobody wants to be around it. So I want you to be mindful of, okay, I'm going down the rabbit hole. What can I be grateful for? Who am I thankful for when bad things are happening around us? What is my purpose? What's my value here? Writing it out is just as effective as talking it out. So getting it out of your head will help your brain and will help your body. You will actually feel lighter and happier by getting this stuff out one way or the other. And as I mentioned, crying can also be a really, really good release. Your faith, your spirituality, your religion, whatever you want to call it, I consider that to be private and personal for each of you, but it's finding what works. There is also a type of healing called Reiki, and it's energy healing. So I'm going to have Lisa here share with you what that means.
Hi, my name is Lisa Mercier, and I'm a Reiki master. Reiki is an alternative healing technique that is sometimes known as biofield therapy. Reiki opens our energy pathways and promotes our body's own ability to heal. There is life force or universal energy flowing in every living being, and sometimes that energy becomes stuck or sluggish as a result of illness, injury, trauma, or day-to-day stress. Reiki can help restore balance by kick-starting the flow of that life force energy. I like to equate Reiki with acupuncture, where the needles are placed in specific parts of the body to break up stagnant energy. The mechanism of Reiki is very similar without the needles. Because it opens up all our channels, Reiki is a total body healing, meaning it's beneficial for alleviating both physical and emotional pain. It promotes relaxation, reduces stress and inflammation, and overall supports the body's natural ability to heal. It treats the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. Reiki is utilized in many settings like pain management clinics and hospitals, making it an excellent complementary treatment to traditional Western medicine. I've been practicing Reiki for 10 years and provide both in-person and distance healings.
So, first, has anyone heard of Reiki before? Okay.
Yes.
So, she does the virtual work, but if you also have people in your area where you live that provide this service, again, you can try everything. You may say, no, this is too woo-woo. That's fine. You want needles? Do needles. You can do whatever you want, but I want you taking control of your wellness. And I will tell you that I have done Reiki with Lisa, and it is really remarkable how calm the brain and body will feel when it's done and how it will last for weeks. So it's really, really phenomenal. There is something going on, at least in the southern region of the state, called annual wellness check-ins. And we've got police and firefighters talking to therapists on duty for an hour once a year. And it doesn't mean that something's wrong. We actually talk about sleep, we talk about operational stress, we talk about whatever the person wants to talk about for an hour. But it's a really good way for all of you to be able to dump out what you've collected over the course of your year and make room for more. So it's even a proactive way to take care of yourself. I also see therapy as asshole prevention. One of my clients actually said this to me and thought it was pretty funny. I don't want to be an asshole, so I go to therapy. Sometimes we just overthink talking to others about the things going on in our life. So here's what I'm going to ask everyone to do. If you have a pen and paper, great. If not, if you would take your phones out.
We're allowed to have phones in these?
You're allowed to have phones, right? Let's use our technology for good. I want you to get to a notes page, and I'd like you to make a list of everything that is causing you stress in your life right now. Just put them in there, number them, 1 to whatever. Don't overthink it. And for those of you watching this video, please do the same thing. Everybody ready for step 2? All right, step 2 is I want you to ask yourself, go down to each one and ask yourself, can I fix, change, or control that stressor in my life? Do I have the power to fix, change, or control that stressor? And then acknowledge, highlight, or circle, whichever ones you can. All right, so here's the next step. If the answer is yes, then you're going to create a plan. If you have the ability to fix, change, or control a situation in your life that's causing you stress, then you create a plan. And sometimes we have to write it down, right? Plan A is this. I'm going to do this, this, and this to accomplish this goal and to reduce this stress. However, if the answer is no, this is the hardest part for all of us as humans, is learning to let it go. Because when you look at your life and you think about the things causing you stress and anxiety and the things we ruminate, we get so worked up about, so many times those are things that we cannot fix ourselves. We can't control. We don't have the power to do it. And so we get to ask ourselves, do we want to spend all this energy doing this in our head, or do we want to let it go? And so what I've been teaching people, I'm going to ask everyone to look at me for a second. You know what I just did? I let it go. Let that shit go. Give it to the universe, give it to God, however you see it, whatever you believe in. But you get to choose how you're going to manage the stress that's in your life. And I know that this is easier said than done, but the strategy I just gave you, you can use at any time, anywhere, to calm the brain down and say, okay, I'm going to practice letting go. I am not going to be able to control the way people drive on the road when I get home. I am not going to be able to control how the pilot flies the plane. Just let it go. It will make us all a lot calmer inside and out. And so with that, I do want to remind you that in this family, no one fights alone. You have an amazing peer support, Live Well team. I know you have people in this department who care about each other. You are a family, and I know that you have been through a lot. So I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing me to be here again. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now. Or you can text me or email me, and I'd be happy to give you resources or whatever else there might be. Any questions? Okay. And then is it okay to share about the resource? Okay. The last thing I want to mention is that it is my company and my clinicians that are available to all of you. If you are interested in talking to a therapist about any of the things going on, you have access to our people. So I just wanted to make sure that I said that before I ended.
Let me add on to that too. So the office will pay for 2 sessions for free with Premier First Responders, Heather's company, and it's totally confidential. So there's no reason not to take advantage of it. The office will just get a billing statement of how many sessions were done. It's totally confidential. So
Everybody
it's a
just
great
gets a number. There are no names, no identifying information. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather.
All right, thank you.
Mike, thanks for coming up with this like that. Sorry for the urgent email. I should have put in a request through Diamond, so thanks for being